And we're live. Hi.
Howdy.
Hi.
This is our fifth installment or session of the Study on Love Chats. That's pretty cool, right?
Yes.
I think so.
We've succeeded at doing this every month this year. So I'm pretty impressed. And I feel like you guys are like owners with me now. It's not just about me and what this thing that I'm trying to do.
Well, this is only my second time, so I don't want to like take ownership just yet. I'll take that soon enough.
You can. You can, whatever. I'm kind of like giving it away. But yeah, everybody's doing good?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Doing good.
I'm apologizing for the light level that's happening here. I don't know. This is what it wants, so
deal with it.
So deal with it. Let's dive in. So last month we talked about self-love, and we were talking about expectations that we put on other people, expectations that we put on ourselves. And so the question that we left with was kind of taking inventory of what kind of expectations we make and how that works out for us. I have a confession. I didn't do the homework.
There was homework?
Well, I mean,
I think that answers for me. Double confession.
So, Lauren, you thought about it, right?
I did.
I think it was your question.
I mean, I'm kind of always thinking about myself.
It's always my question.
Okay, well, start us off.
Okay. I was thinking about this actually pretty recently. I was thinking about just like we do it on a day-to-day, just like when we interact with people, but I think that because this is something that I had been more aware of recently, of just like putting expectations on other people and like being disappointed or like feeling away. But I extended this thought into like my desires that had to do with more than just me, and thinking about like, you know, if I want something or I want to have like if I have some sort of like desire about, oh, I want, you know, maybe even just like a friendship to be a certain way, or like interactions with people where it's like sometimes I think we have expectations and we, you know, in that same way we have expectations about other people and then we don't tell them what those things are.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, it was interesting in the situation that I was thinking about specifically. I was like, oh, is it like, what's the word? Like it became almost about consent, because it was like, am I exercising my will over this person without their consent? And then, I don't know, that became a little bit more serious for me, where it was like, oh, I should really think about that. Like, I should really think about the things that I put on other people as, you know, am I not respecting their autonomy? Like, I don't know if that is
So
kind of more off topic of this.
Well, what I'm about to ask is, when you recognize that that's what you were doing with that like particular person or that relationship, for instance, did you find that it changed how you interacted with them directly in person? Like, did it change your dynamics or like how you approached them or communicated with them?
For sure. I think for me, it was, I began asking them what they wanted more, and communicating what it was that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here's specifically what I'm interested in. What are you interested in? Let's create some parameters so that we can both be in a similar place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
And that kind of it didn't matter what the expectation was, whether it was something of like something good that you were expecting to come out of that, or whether it was like you had low standards or whatever. It didn't matter what the expectation was, but the fact that you recognized it and that you started to communicate it and like actually let it be a part of the relationship explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
Did they then come back and like say, well, here's what I'm expecting and here's what I have in mind?
We didn't get that far. I think that because it's not necessarily something that we ask of people, like in our day-to-day, it's like, oh, you know, like, what do you want out of this friendship? Or like, you know, like people are like I don't know.
Yeah, and
But I think that it's still important to ask.
that's funny. So it's interesting you brought that up because I feel like you know, with my husband, we started kind of that very thing when we were dating, of like, so we both were each other's first relationship. Hey, Bertrand, welcome.
Hey, how are
Hey.
you?
Doing good. I'll catch up real quick, and then I was getting ready to tell a story. We're rehashing over last month's prompt about expectations, what kind of expectations we have on people, and how those expectations are serving us. And so Lauren was just talking about how she realized she had these set of expectations and had never really communicated them to that person she was in the relationship with, and when she realized that, it became kind of a point of opening up and of discussion of like, oh, well, here's what I, you know, direction I would like to go. How do you think about that, right? And it's interesting that we don't generally do that. Like her friend didn't really have a response. We were not used to setting those kind of parameters explicitly with relationships that we have with people. So what I was about to say was, like with me and my husband, we are both each other's first relationships. And we started dating at an older age. I was 25, he was 24 when we started dating. And it's one of those things that's like, okay, we've seen relationships. We've seen them in media. We've seen them with our friends. We know what it looks like, you know, in general. But he was really great at saying, sure, okay, but what do we actually want for
Right.
ourselves? And so we started our relationship kind of without assumptions and without any kind of box standards or whatever, and we really like each step of the way of like, okay, this is what intimacy looks like. Well, hold on, you know, how comfortable are we with this, and what do we want this to be shaped like? So we've kind of got that going early on, and I think it's kind of for me bled into other relationships of having that conversation and asking that question. What are our expectations? So I think there's definitely value in doing that and bringing that into our relationships.
I think also not expecting somebody to have an answer to that, especially not right away, because culturally we're not really taught how to frame that stuff in an individual sense. At least it's kind of how I feel. Relationships, you're given like a standard template, and like you said, you have to figure out what works for you as an individual, but then also for your partner as an individual, and then let them kind of falter, let them kind of like stumble their way through that, and
Or help them if
Give
that's
them
what the
space.
relationship.
right. I guess what I'm trying to say is like not keep too much pressure on them to always figure it out and have an answer, and be comfortable enough with like spontaneity and uncertainty, which can be scary. But
And be comfortable if their answer is different than
Yeah.
what you would want or what you
Right.
wanted to, you know, to hear.
Right.
Yeah. Bertrand, any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not 100% sure that I'm on the same page as what we're talking about, but help me out a little bit. What were we talking about specifically?
So in relationships, regardless of whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship, but somebody where, you know, you're going to be spending time with the person, we as people, and at least as Americans, like, we're not practiced in saying, hey, Jenny, you know, I want to be friends. This is what that means to me. I like spending this much time with people. I like seeing you face to face. I like doing these sort of things or whatever, right? We don't do that. And so Jenny may be like, oh, yeah, I call her once a month, and that's really cool of a friendship for me. And I'm like, she doesn't like me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because we have different expectations, and we don't ever talk about that.
Right.
So, I mean, what's your experience in that kind of realm?
Yeah, that's fascinating that you even bring that subject up there. I used to teach a class when I was running a company called Referral Institute that was all about relationship. And I would ask a question. At some point, I would say, have you ever been in a relationship where you gave and gave and gave and gave and gave and then gave some more and didn't get anything in return? And could it be that the other person didn't understand the rules of the engagement? And so it's not always just because you're a giver doesn't mean, and you don't get anything in return doesn't mean the other person needs to be demonized. They may just not understand the terms of the engagement.
Right.
And may they may say, I don't like those terms, which would also be okay because everybody's operating from a different filter. And so if we set up rules for what makes us happy in terms of other people's behavior, we may be disappointed a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Totally. So what do you do? Like sometimes there are things that, I seek out a relationship because I'm looking to fulfill a very specific need, right? Like personally, I like to interact in person. I like to spend time with somebody face to face. And if I find out that this person that I'm trying to have a relationship with, that's kind of less important to them, that's like how do I then respond to that? Okay, it's okay with me that they don't share that same expectation, but that's not going to meet my need. So then what do I do?
I mean, I personally think that you're not meant to be compatible with everybody, friendships, romantically, family relationships.
Totally.
There's a lot of family that I have that I don't really talk to very much. And I think just being okay with that, accepting that, and, taking love when it comes to you from the right sources and when it feels good, and recognizing that and not putting too much pressure on people to live up to a standard that's not comfortable for them, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that version?
I said I totally agree with that. 100%. I mean, I think if someone's not, if someone, and I have, what you just said is really interesting because you can start to put from certain people when you're trying to come on strong and be what you think is a good friend and spend a lot of time. And when you get that pushback, you also have to understand that people have different behavioral styles. They're introverted, extroverted. They re-energize themselves in different ways. Some people re-energize themselves by being around a crowd. Some people have to be by themselves. And pushing those needs on them too much kind of hurts the relationship. I know, you can deal with family relationships as well. If someone is just too needy, meaning your response to them has to be favorable enough for them to be happy, that's a lot of pressure for somebody. And so when we're in relationships and we're navigating that or we're negotiating the terms of a relationship, picking up on whether you're feeling some pushback, usually you're right. You're feeling some pushback, and so maybe that's the friend that you don't get to spend that much time with. It's just every once in a while.
And then I think recognizing, because there's, as far as having good boundaries and stuff and finding compatibility with people, I think an important thing is recognizing the difference between like a transgression or like behavior that's actually unhealthy for you versus behavior that's just not compatible with yours. Like if you text somebody back and they don't text you back for 9 hours, like get over it. But if they're not like emotionally, I guess, on the same level as you, if they're manipulative at all, like kind of differentiating between your own hang-ups and then behavior that's actually going to be toxic to you. And forgiving people for mistakes and for not living up to your specific standard, but then staying true to yourself and speaking up when somebody actually acts in a way that's not cool.
And what I pick up on that is like, both sides of me being able to allow somebody to, operate in a way that is them for relationships. If I try to cater myself to what they want and that's not my natural, priority or my natural bent, I'm not actually acting in love toward that person, right? Because especially if their expectations are unhealthy.
Right.
If they have an unhealthy I feel like I'm about to go off, but like, of course, it's just my opinion. But it just seems like if that person's expectations are unhealthy, like you were saying, manipulative or whatever, and I choose to cater myself to that and like follow in that bent, I am not operating in love toward that person because...
Or to yourself.
Well, definitely not to myself, but I'm saying, one, to myself, my needs and my preferences aren't valuable or relevant, but then that person, I'm not helping them to grow and improve and recognize, this isn't the way that's going to lead to long-term happiness for anybody. So yeah, I definitely feel like there's, even though it might be the harder choice sometimes, there it's, the better, the more loving path to say, actually, you know what, I can't give you what those expectation is, and for me right now I need to step back, or I need to do something, whatever, right?
Right.
And just being able to be
Yeah,
honest about that.
Right.
I think being candid and authentic with people is always the easier choice because you have to deal with the mess later if you let it go on.
Totally.
So you say, it may be the harder choice, but if you've been through enough of those, after a while, the easier choice is to do it up front, and it's the more loving choice. Because if I shield you from what I really want to say, what I'm saying is, I don't think, Renata, that you have the goods to deal with the truth, and so I'm going to shade it for you, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
Totally.
Or the opposite of that is not wanting to speak up because you're afraid of that person, basically afraid of abandonment or rejection or whatever form that's going to take, and then that's not good behavior towards yourself.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Because that's not on me. If that's your projection that you're dealing with, that's not my issue.
Yeah.
I can only operate from what's true for me, and so I just lay it out there. And if you've got filters and baggage that causes you pain around that decision, that's not my responsibility. That doesn't mean I have to be cruel about it, but responsibility.
People are so complex. Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I used to feel that way. I used to feel very much that way, and struggle with depression and lots of anxiety and stuff. And I think the best tool that you have for dealing with people is just listening to your instincts and your I'm a thinking type person first and foremost. Emotion comes second to me. I'm always trying to take a rational path, and that used to really, really be super bad for me because I'd feel something and I'd reject it. I'd be like, why do I feel so upset? I'm just being too emotional or whatever. And that's basically denying a very valid part of my experience. So actually listening to that emotion and then using rational thought to try to figure out what it means to you and what to do about it, but not rejecting either side of who you are. And so when I started listening to those feelings, that really helped kind of guide me in relationships towards who I am and then who somebody else is as an individual, and what I could get from them, what I wanted from them. It's really helped me kind of try to figure out what other people are looking for, so that...
I was going to ask if kind of doing that exercise with yourself helped you in relating to other people.
Very much so, yeah.
That's
It's just
cool.
kind of paying attention to their behavior, how they're reacting, how their tone of voice changes, how they're responding to my expectations, all kinds of stuff like that. It makes things a lot easier because you kind of just stop taking things personally a lot of the times, and it's not about you anymore. It's about this person's experience of their entire world and all of the people that they share it with. So.
Yes.
Lauren, were you about to say something?
Oh no, I agree.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts to add there?
I don't know. I relate to a lot of what Jenny was saying. I feel very similarly that for a long time it was like, oh no, why do I feel this way? Or that doesn't really matter that I feel this way because I have things to do, or And it's true. It's the line between recognizing that those feelings are part of your personal, the human experience, and they're valid, and they serve a very specific function, and you need to pair that with that rational, logical side to further investigation of just the world itself, but even yourself. It really does lend to being a lot happier when you allow yourself that experience.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the exact dynamic that I'm talking about is one, like when you were earlier, when you were like, Jenny really likes coming over here and watching me and John. Like, that's one of the reasons is because you guys really kind of exemplify that behavior. You're both completely individual. You're not, I mean, that's kind of a huge, really, really screwed up myth that I think we tell people about marriage is like, you know, the whole two people become one. Like, you have a soulmate, and then you're no longer a separate person. You're some kind of combined entity.
Right.
Like, that's horrible.
Sure,
That's
yeah.
super crappy.
Yeah.
Like, you're never going to be John. And there are going to be,
Right.
like, for the rest of your guys' lives together, there are going to be situations where, like, you make a choice and he doesn't like it. And you're just going to have to figure out how to deal with it.
Totally.
And telling you guys that you're supposed to always be in sync and think like each other is only going to lead to disappointment and like unfair expectations. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really cool that when I see you guys interacting, like you're both so different people, so different as individuals, and yet you read each other well and you allow each other those differences so that you can find comfort in the middle. Like it's like a Venn diagram, you know. There's still you and John, and in the middle there's you guys. Like
sweet
that's
spot.
yeah, that's should be how it works.
And that's funny. So before you started, I was gonna talk about something, a conversation that John and I just had it, but I kind of lost the thought for a minute. What was the last thing, Lauren, that you said? Do you remember?
That using your thoughts and logical side in tandem with your emotions to be happy, like having the emotion, thinking about them, and how that exchange makes you a more pleasant person.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the story. It was some conversation that we just had very recently. It'll come back to me. Bertrand, did you want to? No, you're married, right, Bertrand?
Yes.
So talk about, you know, what that's like, what Jenny was just saying about, like, you know, the two separate individuals, but, you know, you're supposed to function together as a unit, but you're not always going to be unified. What does that even look like for you?
I mean, what she said was spot on. And we have, in the past, sold this bill of goods that, you know, you parents, you cleave to one another and you become one. And I think people have misinterpreted that, because I do think on some gut, visceral level you do become one, but you still have to. You can't always be of the same mind about everything. And nor, I mean, should you? Anyway.
Right.
I mean, it's my wife's very linear thinking. I'm very artistic and intuitive, and we're very polar opposites. And I think you have to allow that. I think what I said earlier, allow that space for the other person to be that other person, is the one of the greatest gifts you can give your partner. I got certified to be a Steve minister years ago, and in that certification process, there was a huge module for weeks on listening. And I read an article by a writer, an editorialist from the 50s, who said, and the article is long, but what she said was really remarkable. She said, listening, when done right, is the most creative act we can do, because when I listen correctly, I allow the person, I create a space where that person can become more of who they are meant to be. Mm-hmm. And so thinking in terms like that, you know, listening bleeds into everything else. Listening is helping to create space. Listening is being respectful to your partner. Listening is the whole act of creating a safe space where that person can absolutely be themselves and be more of who they were meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it sounds really easy, but even just the act of listening is really, really hard, because of, I said it sounds easy enough to really listen to somebody, but that act is really hard because it involves language and interpretation. And I mean, my ability to communicate how I feel or think about something isn't always perfect. I don't always communicate it in the way that it feels to me, or even when I do, it might not translate the way I mean it to. And so,
right.
I guess, I mean, they call it active listening, which is kind of like a corny term or whatever, but like listening, and if you feel like maybe you're not on the same page, like pushing for more information, or and kind of this is something that's really helped me in arguments because I tend to be like a natural debater. Is when I'm talking to somebody and we're arguing about something, realizing at some point that we're not actually arguing about the same thing,
Right.
or we're arguing about something but are actually both arguing the same side of it.
Yeah.
But because of the language we're using, we think we have a difference of opinion. So, like taking breaks when things get heated to step away and be like, what is this even about? What is this conversation? And,
Right.
You reminded me what I was going to say. Sorry, Bertrand, I don't want to forget again, so hold on. About that it's not easy. It's work. And I don't even think we had a disagreement. I don't remember exactly what happened, but at some point our communication was, my husband and I, we just weren't quite matching. And I told him, I realized what had happened, and I said, you know, I recognized what was going on and what I could have done or said to really bring us to the same level. But to be honest, I was feeling lazy. I was just like, like really, I was lazy. And it was more work than I really felt like I had the energy to do at the time. Right. So then we ended up like this. and I, you know, for me, I'm somebody, and I've said this in the past, I really value communications and really, you know, making sure that things are sharp and on point. As much as I can do to contribute to successful, effective communication, I want to do it. I want to be there. But look, some days, like, can I just... whatever, just go ahead and operate in your assumption. I'm just going to sit back. So being able to, for me, and this is again part of what the two of us have established of what does this relationship look like, is we have made it very safe to express ourselves and say, okay, you know what, this is what I feel right now, and it's for me, it's emotional because I still, like, I'm an emotional being. Sounds like your wife, and sounds like kind of like you as far as logical and thinking first and very linear. Yeah. And me, it always comes with emotion. My voice starts shaking immediately or whatever, right? But, you know, we've made it safe for each other to be able to go, okay, this is what's going on right now. I really wanted to be able to have that conversation and make this thing happen, but I just didn't feel like putting in the energy. And he's like, okay. I understand that. I'm glad. Thank you for telling me. Now I know what happened. So that's amazing. And then it kind of just reminds me, okay, it's not easy for everybody. And I'm somebody who wants to put that energy, and everybody doesn't even want to put that energy in all the time. So there's just people, you know, we get lazy. That was it.
That's a good story.
Thanks.
I think kind of...
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, building on what you were saying of like creating a safe atmosphere where whoever you're talking to feels like they can express, because that's something that historically has been super hard for me, since I am first and foremost a rational person, and historically have had, you know, some fairly abusive relationships where when I do, it's already harder for me to speak about who I am emotionally. And then having relationships where I felt like I was kind of punished for whatever I was feeling, where you finally do get up the courage to say something and then you're manipulated, or whatever you have expressed is taken out of context and then turns into a big argument. It basically just shuts you down. You don't want to communicate anymore. You don't feel safe or good doing it. And there's no relationship after that, period. It's done. But you might not recognize that for a long time. So, I guess giving that other person in your life the room to be imperfect and to be hurt sometimes, to be angry, to be disappointed, not to take those emotions on yourself and feel like if they're upset, you have to be upset too, but not to punish them for feeling that way, to like figure out, maybe there's something you could have done differently to help. Or maybe it really isn't your responsibility at all, and just being there to help them, or like give them a shoulder, whatever. That was another thing that was really hard for me, is figuring out that like sometimes people just want to talk about what they're feeling, and you don't have to do anything about it.
They're not looking for a solution.
Right. Because I'm always like, I just want to solve it. I want to make it go away. We've got a problem. Let's get logical about it. And like sometimes that actually makes things a whole lot worse.
Right.
Like if you're still dealing with something, maybe that person isn't ready to move on yet. Maybe they gotta like feel that out. And,
my gosh, this is so good. Do you know it's already 4 o'clock?
Holy cow.
Oh man.
Yes, I actually have to split because I've got a church function I need to get back into.
Well, thank you for joining us. And yeah, totally. We're going to wrap up. But thank you, Bertrand, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. This was awesome. Very, very awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Always good. Lauren, did you want to add anything? You kind of quiet a lot of that one.
Oh, I was just thinking about when Jenny was talking about how when we are having a discussion with somebody and there is sort of like I don't know, I was thinking about how it's crazy. You say something, you have your meanings, you have your associations, and not only is that true, but then it has to go through that other person's filter. And it just really made me think about wow, talking is so hard.
Right?
And it's
a lot of work.
It's wow, it's crazy to me to really think about it has to go through so many layers. And I think part of going back to that original conversation about expectations is recognizing and peeling back a lot of your filter and breaking things down and really explaining when I say this is what this means, this is what my experience has shown me. And it makes me think about specifically, you were talking about John, I was thinking about having conversations with Mom. And I was thinking about how and she will not agree because she doesn't like one word.
Yes.
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that.
And
no, the whole statement is false because that one word doesn't apply.
Right. I'm
right.
super guilty of that.
And so we do. We're like, well, what does this word mean? I think we literally have this word. It's what does this word mean? And you got to go back and redefine and just realign the whole conversation, which I think is actually really positive.
Totally.
Because we're both trying to make the effort to make sure that we are communicating as clearly as possible, and really laying out the terms. And I think that it would serve people to do that a lot more even when they don't have disagreements, when you are really trying to convey something that's important to you, hey,
yes,
just being really clear about just anything that you might need to be clear about, or you feel you want to impart exactly, something into somebody else.
And in the moment, it feels really ridiculous. You're really, do I have to spend time? You should just know. It's clear that this is what the word means, right? Or you know, just agree with this. But like you said, if it's important and you really want to either, reach that common good or reach that agreement, then you need to take the time. Don't be lazy.
Right. You can't be lazy about that.
I want to set I'm choosing the prompt. Yeah. It's not a question, it's a challenge this time. Let's make a conscious choice in moments where we feel like being lazy in communication. Choose not to be lazy. Maybe not every time. You're not going to do it every time. That's hard.
Yeah. That's
but
a lot of work.
Find a time and consciously acknowledge, oh, I'm being lazy in this communication.
Right.
I'm going to not do that.
Right. I'm choosing to shut down a discussion because it's hard. Or yeah.
I don't usually have that problem because I'm really stubborn and tenacious. So when something happens, I'm like, this is getting taken care of now. Especially because stuff will eat at me since I am so logical. If I don't deal with it, then it's all this free floating data. And if you're not talking to me about it, I'm going to be talking to myself about it and trying to figure it out.
Right.
So I'm going to be trying to plug all of these separate pieces of data into this scenario that you're no longer even an active part of. So I don't even have everything that I need to solve it. And it will get messy for me. So I'll power through some stuff.
So what would be the equivalent challenge for you then, or for
somebody? For me, it would be learning to let it go and let it not eat at me and give somebody time. If they need time to think about it more, if they need time to rethink how they're phrasing it.
Right.
Kind of like backing off and being like, okay, this is not a good time for this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's
Jenny, we
perfect.
are the same. What the heck?
I laugh at John because I'm like, when we find those moments where we're like missing, and I'm like, I don't think like you. I don't know why you think we're the same in this, but we're like Bertrand, like complete opposites from each other.
Yeah.
And so I forget. I mean, I'm guilty clearly. Like that was my challenge, but not your challenge.
Right.
So being able to share that and have something that is gonna resonate with people who aren't the same. Okay, so
Right.
if you're like me and you're tempted to be lazy sometimes, your challenge is to fight through and don't be lazy. Just pick one time when you feel that coming. If you're like Jenny and Lauren and you're generally want to stick to your guns until you get to the end, challenge to allow some space. Step back and don't let it eat at you.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot better at that lately. I think, years ago, a lot of that came from fear that, like, if we don't take care of this now, it'll never be resolved, or we'll forget about what the issue is, and it'll just keep haunting us. But then also just like straight up stubbornness, like all of it.
Right. And not taking the time to think. This is very much just like the forever struggle of me and my ex, where it was like I wanted to resolve something right then and there. It was like, okay, like I'm having a conversation with you. We've stumbled upon something that's hard. Let's talk about it. And for him, he wants to retreat and like shut down at confrontation. And I really had to learn to just give him some time to think about whatever it was that, because I think sometimes he was such an emotional person that there weren't thoughts. It was just like a feeling.
Right.
Totally.
It was just a feeling. And I'm like, tell me about this feeling. Why did you have it? And he's like, And I'm like, no, like this feeling, like you did this thing, which can relate back to this thought. Is this
there's
the thought
causality
that you had?
There's logic. Find it.
Is this the original thought that you had? Because this thought needs to be corrected.
No logic. No logic. Only emotion.
There is. See, the thing is, though, is that there is logic.
There
always.
Is.
Emotion is physical. It's physiological.
Yes.
Somewhere.
I don't want to talk about this right now.
But well, the thing is that it's not always obvious or easily accessible to figure out that.
Absolutely.
So giving somebody time and like
giving someone space and time to think about it.
Yeah, and being understanding if they can't find that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes when I'm feeling really messed up, I can't figure that part out. Like I'm all in my head. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
There's one more thing that I wanted to say that Lauren reminded me of when you were talking about like peeling back filters and stuff and getting at like what communication is and how it's manifesting. Is like there's one more thing that makes that really hard sometimes, which is past experiences that might be similar but aren't that current situation, which might like emotionally make you feel a response that links back to that. It's like you might be talking to somebody and they might be like, I don't have time for this right now. And what you might hear is, I don't have time for you. Like that might have been, a situation that's too similar to something in the past where you were just constantly rejected and kind of emotionally invalidated. And so also recognizing that when you're responding to a current situation in a more extreme way than maybe is warranted, and like realizing that, giving yourself some time and space to cool down, and then kind of readdressing it. And you're like, okay, this is the actual problem I'm dealing with right now.
It's good.
It is good, yeah.
Just be good to each other.
Be excellent to each other.
Be excellent to each other. Like, slow down. I'm ending with this, because we're going to keep going if I don't end this. Slow down. Give yourself time and space. Give other people time and space. Let love come through. Anyway.
Gross.
Whatever. I love you.
I love you too, Lauren.
I love Jenny. What the heck?
All right. Well, we're going to end this now and talk in a month. But until then, be excellent to each other.
Be excellent to each other.
Be excellent.